This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. I just wanted to do a very sort of quick sort of thought today. I've just got a few minutes before Lenny comes back with Elodie. And sort of my relationship to gear has changed quite a bit over the years. So I kind of wanted to talk in this video about why I think I get a more positive feeling from selling gear than buying gear. I don't know if any of you relate to that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Any bits of gear that you regret selling as well, because I think that's a key point here. But here I'm going to be playing over a Michael Landau session, some chords. I did a video on these chords the other day, but the backing track is on Patreon if you're interested. And I'll be using Helix Native. So, I've just gone through a little bit of a phase. I did a few videos where I bought a few amps that I've had a bit of history with. And one of the things that I've found is that normally if I sell a piece of gear and then I buy it back again, it's a very, like each time you do that, the honeymoon period is kind of shorter and shorter is what I've found. And yeah, I've just sold a couple of bits and you know, a bunch of stuff actually. And I think it's quite a releasing feeling. Maybe I should talk to a therapist about this rather than you guys. But I don't know, I think sometimes it's nice, instead of just, you know, pushing new bits of gear and stuff like that, to also talk about the flip side of this, which is that sometimes gear, you don't have to keep it all. And I used to have a little bit of a hoarding mentality with this, I think. And I've definitely got friends who have not really sold any gear. I don't really want to out them, but they've got guitars that they never really play, that, you know, potentially someone else might really get something out of. And that's one of the things that I kind of like. So first of all, like when I buy a piece of new gear, for me personally, sometimes alongside that comes like a bit of guilt, because I've already got plenty of gear, right? And maybe I should be doing something more productive with it, like spending it on my daughter. You know, so I get like a bit of guilt. And then I have this other thing where it's like I try to talk about not necessarily having as much gear. And so, you know, over time I've tried to pare back, for instance, my amp collection. So here now I've got this 1, 2, 3, 4, like 4 amps here. And I did have 2 extra amps that I've just sold. And so that's another thing that I tried to, you know, people are thinking like, well, why are you buying all this gear then if you're telling us that you're selling gear? It's kind of like in and out and all of that sort of stuff, where you try to keep some sort of freshness. The thing about selling a piece of gear is that I find then that I feel a little bit freer in my mind to explore some other gear, because one of the key factors in this stuff is obviously finance. So I'm not gonna go out and buy, for instance, I was thinking like I want a Fryette power station, but I was like, well actually, you know, do I have enough money in my bank account right now to justify that? maybe I should sell some gear first. So that's kind of how I try to think about this stuff. Is like, is there some stuff that's non-essential that I'm maybe not going to be gigging, maybe I'm not going to be using that a ton, so I can sell that, and then that can help to fuel other purchases. This is one of the really positive things that I could think of around this gear addiction that you don't really get with most other addictions. I think it's a less destructive behavior than some, right? Where, you know, if you've got other things going on, there can be things that you just spend money and there's no way of getting them back. I think of, you know, whatever vice it is. At least with gear, even if you've bought it new, you can recoup probably about half of that money, maybe a little bit more than that. And if you buy gear used, which is oftentimes what I do, you can really often sell it back for what you paid for it. And then, like my buddy Keith from 5 Watt World talks about, you can kind of then think about that as whatever you lose on it is like the loan value that you paid for the gear, right? You loaned the gear for a while and then you sold it on. So that's how I try and think about it. But for me personally, I really do get like seeing the money like come from eBay back into my bank account, and then seeing the gear go out of the door to a new home where hopefully someone else can enjoy it. I do get a real sort of kick out of that. And versus, it's like the opposite feeling of when you buy a piece of gear, where initially it comes in, you get like a little bit of dopamine or whatever it is that happens, and you maybe play it and you think, oh, that's pretty cool. And then that sort of diminishes over time in a lot of gear purchases. Like necessarily you can only bond with certain amounts of things, and then that gives way, I find, to sort of like a little bit of a guilt feeling where it's like, well, I've got this amount of money tied up in this piece of gear which is mainly sat there collecting dust. That's kind of the opposite feeling to when you sell a piece of gear. Sometimes you have to sell a piece of gear that you like, and that's a little bit more difficult. And that's one that I'm sort of wrestling with a bit more. But if it's something that I don't play or don't feel the need to pick up every day, then most times I've actually found that I could sell that on, and there is like a feeling of nostalgia. But as I say, any time that I've bought a piece of gear back that I initially sold, even if it was sold, you know, for instance, because I was trying to get a mortgage for a house or that sort of thing, where it's like a little bit of a needs must thing, each time that I've bought a piece of gear back in that circumstance, actually, I think I've fallen on the side of I'd rather not have actually done that this time. So that's kind of just my take on it, and I just thought it was valid to my life right now as I'm selling a few pieces of gear. I think things are shifting quite nicely on eBay at the moment as well, so that's kind of a good thing. I think people have got some spending money after Christmas, or feeling like they want to try new bits of gear. You know, certain things like Boss pedals you can be guaranteed to sell pretty quickly all the time. I think there's a side to this gear addiction thing, or however you want to call it, where I think it's like the gear trap, or like the, you know, we're getting marketed to, and I'm complicit in that. But I also get a lot of joy out of just moving that gear back onto a new sort of home. And of course, you know, there's a bunch of guitars that I've sold that presumably people are out there playing that enjoy them, hopefully. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, because, you know, it's Monday morning. I've done a video on legato and I wanted something easy to talk about. So yeah, I've sold a bunch of gear, and there's still more to go, and I hope the people that have grabbed the gear are going to find as much enjoyment, or more even, than I did. Thinking particularly of my K-Line Springfield, which someone quite local to me sold to me, and is gone on to be, you know, my most treasured guitar. I think that's quite a cool thing, is that people might find their dream guitar that you just for whatever reason didn't bond with, or pedals, amps, you know. I think that's a really nice kind of thing about gear, where the used market is just as vibrant, I think, as the new market. And yeah, if you buy new guitars, let folks know in the comments why you choose new instead of used. I'd love to know your thoughts on that as well, because obviously the used market doesn't necessarily help directly, you know, gear companies as much as the new market, but I think it does help things move along, you know. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Cheers for stopping by, and as I say, that backing track will be on Patreon, as well as this preset that I'm using here.